We have with us Hugh Howey. He is, of course, a best-selling author with over 2 million copies sold. But he's also, I would say, an insightful observer of the publishing business and the self-publishing business. He published a report, a brilliant report, I think back in February, with an analysis about the publishing and self-publishing business. And you can find that at authorearnings.com. So, you started with self-publishing, and I think that you represent the self-publishing at its full potential, because you are publishing, you publish high-quality ebooks. You sold millions and millions of copies. You have been promoting yourself in many different countries, and you have been fun so far. So you are really enjoying this self-publishing journey. You started as a self-published author, independent author, and then you found a publisher. May you, tell us about your experience, how you started, and how then you found a publishing company.
Sure. Can everybody hear me? I know we have people in the back, and I was trying to listen in on a panel earlier, and it was very difficult, but also don't want all the people up here to die because of, I feel like Lady Gaga with this thing on. So, yeah, my publishing background's a little more complicated than that even. My first book was with a small publisher. It was with a small press, and so I learned about the querying process, and I learned how to put a book out with a publisher, with an editor and cover artist and a team. And when I got the contract for the second book, I decided I wanted to give it a go on my own. So I've been self-publishing ever since, and then I had publishers get interested and pick up works. I think it's dangerous to use outliers as our guidance. I'm an outlier in self-publishing. There are outliers in traditional publishing. We all would love for to have that kind of success, but I think very often we don't get actionable things on what can I do as a writer today, because you don't like teleport from where you are to where I am. I certainly didn't, and so I think it's healthy to figure out what things are beneficial to writers with different aspirations and different goals. Instead of thinking, okay, that person's where I want to be, give me a shortcut. I think that's less than helpful. What I love about, I don't love the term hybrid author. I think it sounds like an exclusionary thing, like it's some club that you went into, and I don't like labels like that. I just think of myself as a writer, and there are a lot of different ways of getting our stories out to readers. Everyone in here is a writer because everyone in here is on Facebook, and you're constantly self-publishing your thoughts to a wider audience. You're tweeting, you're writing blogs. Writing books is very similar. There's all different ways of getting them out there. And I don't, putting labels on things is helpful, but what I think is useful is a lot of the writing process is the same no matter how we deliver our story. We still have to get a book written. We have to take into account how we're going to find our audience. And the hybrid moniker and what we're talking about here is that there's no one solution. There's a lot of pros and cons. What are those pros and cons, and how do they affect our goals as writers?
I mean, you started publishing in digital format, and then you signed a contract with a big publishing company for the print format while keeping the rights for the digital book in North America.
It's a great question.
Yes, why did you do that? Was it hard? And can you give us a bit of background about that?
Yeah. So, and this is another, kind of a misconception about early on. I thought of myself as a print author. I wanted books. I'm a reader, and I love books, and I wanted to hold them. What was really transformative in the mid 2000s, CreateSpace, which is one of the print-on-demand companies, Lightning Source is another. They made it affordable for us to buy and hold our printed work without buying. Back in the day, you bought 5,000 copies of your book from a scam vanity press, and they sat in your garage forever, and you were out $20,000 for really horrible editing, horrible cover art. And these took advantage of our dreams. That's why they called them vanity publishers. They took advantage of our desire to see our stories as books, because we're all readers and we love books. Print on demand means it costs me $4 to hold a book in my hand. And when I started off, that's all I wanted. I wanted to finish my story, have a book, and be able to get it to people. The digital side came and swamped my print sales. And so it looks like I'm a digital-only author. And once I started having earnings, I was a digital-only author. I mean, I still sell print books, but digital is such a huge revenue stream that I was willing to sell the print off to a publisher, and it didn't feel like a risky endeavor. Selling my digital rights to someone once I was already earning a living felt horrible. And I've seen authors now turn down six-figure advances from publishers, publish themselves, and earn that amount of money within the first year of publication, and they still own their rights, and they're going to continue earning forever. So the reason and this deal is not easy, and they're hard to reproduce because publishers are saying we don't want to do these anymore. They're circling the wagons on these deals. They're making so much money on the digital side now that they're becoming digital publishers as much as they want to say we publish print books. When I talked to them, I said, I'll give you the print rights for free. No one wanted them. But they want to give me $1 million for the print plus digital. So I did the math. I took $1 million and I subtracted zero, and I was left with $1 million. And I thought, okay, so the digital is worth $1 million and the print's worth nothing. That's what the publishers taught me through this process. So as writers, we're sold like, you want to be in print, you want to be in bookstores, but their business decisions are, we know digital is where the money is, and that's why we're not going to break up these rights. We went through a year of turning down deals from other publishers. What you can take away from that is that your digital rights are worth a lot. Your books are going to be available forever. You can control the price. You can control the cover art. You can change these things very quickly. And when I saw this, I started devoting more attention to my digital books. I saw readers were finding them more easily. I was getting 70% royalties versus in print. You don't make very much at all. So it certainly looks like I'm digitally focused, but that's because the market and the readers kind of made that happen. But I think for all writers, the important thing there is that even though we love books, and we all do, and my house is wallpapered in them, and I've got like 10 with me on this trip, which is way too many to be flying across the pond. I still have to look at the market and realize that digital is where the future is going to be. These electrons are very inexpensive, and these books are going to be available forever, and we have to have that long-term view.
Yes, absolutely. But on the other hand, from my understanding, you decided to give the digital rights of your books in Europe, in New Zealand, in Australia. Why? Why you kept the rights in North America?
Yeah, there were two considerations there, and it might have been a mistake. I mean, I make more mistakes than I get things right, but the ebook market is slower in other countries. Well, the translations, it's easy to give up the rights because I'm never going to translate my works. So this is a new market that I can tap into that I'll never do on my own. You can do on your own. It just takes a lot of time and effort. With the foreign English rights, the ebook market wasn't as mature, and it gave me a chance to experiment, to work with Random House and work with an editor and see how do I like working with traditional publishers on a different scale than that first publisher I worked with. And yeah, I learned a lot from it, and I really enjoyed the process, and I look forward to working with them again. But I went into it, this last deal, knowing that I'm probably going to lose money going with Random House instead of self-publishing in the UK, because all of your growth curves in the UK are trending the same way they did in the US. You're like lagging by a few years, but you have the same potential here, possibly even more, because from what I see, the stigma here still exists against self-publishing, but it's not nearly, from what I've observed, what we had in the US. And I think because part of that's because you have examples of people doing well in the US, and we didn't. We had to form those examples as we went. We had to tear down those walls plank by plank. You guys can already see people streaming through the walls, and of course you're still going to bump into some remnants of it and some resistance. So it's probably a mistake for me to take a digital traditional publishing deal here. I'll own that, but I also have the luxury of not making financial decisions anymore. I'm doing well enough that I don't look at my actions now to see how you should think about the market.
But also I think that's absolutely idiomatic for self-publishing, because basically you learn, it's a learning process, you make mistakes, and if you learn from your mistakes, that's absolutely a positive experience, because you are a publisher, and you are also, because you are trying a completely new and different business model. So of course there are things you have to explore and you have to understand as you lead. And I've got another question for you about self-publishing and publishing companies, because self-publishing platforms have become sorts of test labs for publishing companies in order to find interesting new authors. So what can publishing companies do in order to make themselves more appealing to interesting self-published authors?
Well, what they've had in the past, the way they've had two really big things, well, maybe three, to really offer authors. One is a lump sum of money up front, which is like a loan against your advances that you don't have to pay off if you don't earn it all back. But having that money is very appealing because most of us are starving artists. The second is to appeal to our egos, to have someone who knows books and rejects a lot of people accept us. And I'm as vulnerable to that as anybody else. I'm sensitive to whether or not my wife likes my books. I want to be accepted. The third is the potential to see your book in a bookstore, which, as growing up readers and seeing books in bookstores and loving them, we want that. Those barriers are going to fall out as the financial equation becomes so lopsided that we see more and more people earning a living self-publishing, and hearing more and more from people who are traditionally published who have a day job because they can't earn a living, because the difference in payment is that vast. And you get paid twice a year with a traditional publisher. You get paid monthly self-publishing. So publishers are going to have to change their contracts in order to lure in talent. And I think this is this problem is going to be exacerbated in the future. 10 years from now, you're going to have more and more people, and I meet them every day. I met some right before this talk who, in the last 2 years, this is someone in a master's creative writing program has sold 20,000 ebooks in 2 years. And they were bashful about it because it didn't seem like very much to them. That's more than most traditionally published authors will sell in their lifetime. And they're in a MFA program where their fellow students are still looking down on self-publishing. These people will spend more time trying to land their first agent than this person has spent learning the business, getting their works out there, and earning 40,000 pounds in the process. So that's the attitude I had early on. I didn't care if my goal is to sell 5,000 books in my lifetime. That was my goal starting off as a writer, because I don't know 5,000 people. And I thought the ultimate test was to sell a book to someone other than my mom and my mom's friends. And my mom doesn't have 5,000 friends. So this was my benchmark. Having that low aspiration, as I was publishing books, I didn't worry what that first book did. I finished that book and I started writing the second one. And my goal was to write for 10 years before I cared if anybody found my first book. And this is the biggest issue, I think, facing writers today. And I think it's the reason the hybrid approach is important. You can start your career self-publishing and end up wherever you want to. But do you want to spend your time sending your manuscript out to agents and hoping to impress one person who, let me tell you how that works. They've got a stack of manuscripts like this, and they're not even the ones seeing it. Their interns are seeing it. They're weeding through them. If you misspell the agent's name, if you don't format it properly, if you give them any excuse to set it aside, they are so happy with you because you just gave them permission to winnow your wonderful book out. And to me, that process seems a lot more difficult than putting your story out and hoping that your one first cousin who read it and actually liked it, if it's a good book, told 2 other people about it, and then it spreads from there while you're publishing more books. This to me seems like a more, let me give you an example with music. No one tries to make it in music by recording an album, never letting anyone hear them play or anyone listen to their album, and then you go around to music studios and you play them your demo and no one's ever heard it or given you feedback. You're just thinking, well, this is great. I think it's great. I hope someone pays me $1 million for it. No, artists don't work that way. Painters don't work that way. Photographers don't work that way. The hybrid model allows you to feel out your market, to get your work out there, and if you want to be with a publisher, let them come to you. You know, and I know this sounds crazy. Well, it sounded crazy when I said it 3 years ago, but we should be hiring we should be hiring agents. They work for us, not begging the first person who will have us and just going with them and then finding out they're not very good at their job, which is why they had an open space available anyway, because their last 5 people left. And I posted this on a forum 3 years ago that in the future, we'll get our works out there, we'll appeal directly to readers, and once we have a big enough readership, agents will come to us and interview us for the job. And everyone said I was absolutely crazy. Within 6 months, this was happening to me. Agents were calling me and saying, I want 15% of what you're making. And I said, no thanks, and hung up on them. I wrote them form rejection letters. I'm serious, but I finally heard from an agent who made a lot of sense and talked sense into me, because I was wrong. I did need an agent. I just needed the right one. And I was able to find them by concentrating on the reader. That's what, to me, what the hybrid model is about. It's also about people with backlists. There's probably people in the audience who've been with traditional publishers, have published books, they didn't have success, they've gotten their rights back. What do I do with them? Make them available and write your next book.
Also, I think that, from my experience with the Kobo Writing Life, our platform, because you are a bright example, very successful example of a self-published author, but also there is a real backbone of authors that are not as successful as you. Maybe not only fiction, but non-fiction authors. They have their niche markets, and those niche markets can be extremely rewarding. Also because, especially these days, with international distribution, you can get in touch not only with the niche market in your country, but in many other countries around the world. So combining all those niche markets, you can definitely, gain visibility, and you can definitely increase your sales and maybe make a living out of writing.
Yeah, and I meet people at every conference. I meet people who I've never heard of. We've never heard their name. They're completely not even close to a household name, and they're making 6 figures a year. And the more I ran into this, and just meeting someone today who thinks they're not doing very well, and they've sold 20,000 books, and I know a lot of you out there would love to have those sales. For years, I couldn't imagine selling 20,000 books, and now that's something that someone does while they're studying to be a writer. You're already a writer if you've sold 20,000 books. These are the people who, A, should be up here giving talks, because that's the true story of what's happening in the market. Publishers don't have I've got friends who've been with big publishers who had 6-figure advances that were dropped because they weren't selling hundreds of thousands of copies. Selling tens of thousands is not enough to stay with a publisher. It's enough to make a living off of, though. And that's the backbone of Kobo and all the digital distributors. They're not making as much from me and the 7 other people in my booth who've, together we sold 12 million or 15 million books. That's nothing compared to what the long tail is sold combined. That's the more important market for self-publishing and for readers for the variety. And I hope we don't perpetuate a blockbuster model with self-publishing where people like me are the ones we listen to. I think talking to the people who are making thousands of dollars a month and changing their lives because they found their niche and because they're producing good material, that can be you if you take your craft seriously. And those are the heroes of this movement.
Absolutely. I think that definitely, because you are driven by passion. You do that, you write because you feel the need to do that, and these days you have the opportunity to have visibility, to get in touch with the readers, and it's not really important if you sell, of course, if you have the opportunity to sell millions and millions of copies, that's even better, but the self-publishing journey, you can really enjoy that, also in terms of meeting with other people, learning new things, understanding, and also improving yourself as a writer and as a person, so it is also a social experience.
Absolutely. And it's social in another way, in that self-published authors, from what I've seen, and you can see it in the fact that we're in a booth together and promoting each other all the time, is that we're in this together. It's a community of writers, and we give each other advice and support and whatever we can for each other, because we know we're not competitors. We can't possibly write fast enough for our readers. It's really frustrating. I hit publish at midnight, and I'm like so excited. I got this book out of my system. I can sleep soundly. I wake up in the morning, someone stayed up all night reading it, wrote a review, and then sent me an email asking me when the next book is going to come out. And I thought I was going to take a day off, you know? And so, okay, open up a blank document, I'm writing the next book. But I want someone else to write a great book and get other people excited about reading. You know, we build this market together. We don't take readers from each other. We take readers from the television and from movies and from video games. So when I read a great book, I want everyone else to read it, to remember how much they love reading. And then when I get my next book out, please give me 3 months to do it. When I get my next book out, they're still reading. They didn't give up on reading, you know, because we've all fallen off the horse at some point in our lives. You know, we read a bad book. We don't know why we did it, but we went through a weeks period or months period where we just didn't read as much. And that's the danger. And that's what we can solve by making sure our quality is great, making sure we promote other great books, and looking at this not as a competitive market or as a one method beats all other methods. Right now, in my opinion, having done both and having worked with a small press with over 30 big publishers and self-publishing a dozen works, in my opinion, and this was my opinion before I had success, so it's not post hoc reasoning because of what happened to me, self-publishing has too many advantages to ignore. And traditional publishing is changing to take those advantages away, which is brilliant. We want change. We want the two sides to come together. But if I was starting a career right now, I would have the hybrid model in the back of my mind, and I would start as a self-published author and consider that being a musician who goes and plays on the sidewalk with a hat out and then gets a gig in a bar and plays a small gig in front of a handful of people and then plays in a small club and then finally gets on the stage. You know, you don't hope you're going to record that album and then get directly on the stage and have Lady Gaga's career. I've got Lady Gaga on my mind. I swear, having this on, I've never worn one of these before, and I feel like I'm supposed to be singing and dancing or something.
And you know, how much time do you devote to promoting yourself? Because you know, I think it's quite, you are very busy, and of course you are a writer, so you have to find the time to write. So what is the balance between writing and promoting yourself?
Writing comes first. It's the most important thing. When I finished my first book, my dad drove him crazy that I wasn't going out and promoting myself. And I told him, I'm going to write the next book. And now that I know I can do it, that's all I care about. And I'm glad I did that because writing is the best promotion, getting your next work out there. When I had a day job, it was hard to work the writing around that. Well, it's the same thing now. I don't have a day job, but I have a lot of other business-related stuff. You know, that's my day job, the publishing success. The publishing itself is not a big day job. When people say, I can't wait to be with a publisher so I can just write and have someone else do all the work, that's not how it works. They're going to ask you how many Twitter followers you have, how do you have a blog, how often are you going to update it, what are you going to do to promote your work. So the same basic components of having a writing career are required no matter how you publish. The big difference for me is that when I was self-publishing, I could write a book, publish it, and forget about it. I don't care if it sells now. It's still new 10 years from now because no one's heard from it. And I could go right back to writing. Once I had success, well, now I've got emails, and I've got agents, and I've got publishers, and I have all this to do. So the traditional side has kept me much busier than the self-publishing side. And that's something, I hear that inverted all the time, and it's one of the worst lies out there, that somehow when you have a traditional publisher, you're not, I get emails from, can you shoot a video for this, for this one region or this one market, and your German readers really want a video, and your Spanish readers want a video, and can you write a blog for this thing, and we got interviews from Brazil, and I stay really busy with that stuff. Back in the day, this is why I could write 3 books a year. So use your time, use your anonymity wisely, write as much as you can now, and hope that it's your 10th book that takes off, because you'll have a backlist. And the other thing I'll say about that, the self-publishing takes about a weekend. You write the novel, and it might take you 10 years, it might take you 10 weeks. Then the quality has nothing to do with the amount of time that you put into it. The quality has to do with the passion that you put into it. When you're done with that, and you go through the editing process, which you better do before you submit it to an agent anyway. You better have the same book that you would publish going to an agent. So don't think, one requires all these editing processes and proofreading, and sending to an agent, well, they're just going to ignore my spelling errors. Now, you've given them an excuse to ignore your manuscript. If you want to get traditionally published first, I would hire an editor. Save up your money every day. Don't drink coffee, whatever you have to do, and hire an editor to make your work perfect or that agent is going to reject it, just like the readers will. So that amount of work is the same. But the publishing, with Kobo, it takes me, now I can do it in a couple of hours, you know, and that includes writing my blurb and getting the image formatted. The first time, it took me 1 weekend. It took me a Saturday and a Sunday to read all the facts, log into my account, figure out how to do it, upload everything, and press a button. 2 days. And so that's where we're going to say, like, no, that's just way too much work for me. I'm going to give up 70% of the money I make because those 2 days are just brutal. If that's your thought process, then you're writing books a lot quicker than I am, because it takes me months to write a book, and it takes me a weekend to upload it, and now to like 5 different accounts. It's not that hard. A lot of people are self-publishing late in life. I had a lady in my writing group in Boone, North Carolina, who was 102 when she published her first book. She self-published it, and I was going to her with questions like, so how did you do this, and how did you do that? And I mean, she could barely move her mouse, and she was teaching me how to use these websites. And I will say, to pimp Kobo, they have one of the best ones in the business right now. You have to look at their dashboard. Even if you don't have a book to upload yet, just sign into your account to look at it. It's clean and beautiful.
Yes, because this evolution, the self-publishing evolution is driven by technology. And we understand that technology can be daunting. That's the reason why we design our platform to be absolutely user-friendly, you know, intuitive, because at the end of the day, you are writers, you know, you are not engineers, so it's very important to make the process very easy and intuitive. Back to promotions, I would like to talk about, your promotion here with Kobo Writing Life, because as you can see, I've got a banner, you know, just next to me, with all the authors. You can scan the QR code. Through the QR code, you get prompt to the product page on Kobo, and by using this promo code, Kobo LBF 2014, you can download the ebook for free. So this is not only, you know, to talk about the promotion with Kobo Writing Life, but because I think there are 2 very interesting elements in this promotion, in this banner. First of all, banding together. The power of banding together, join forces, you know, in order to produce a positive synergy. And then the second element is the way you can promote yourself by giving away your content for free. Because you are an author with millions and millions of copies sold, but anyway, you are giving away your copy for free. And of course, there is a strategy behind. Would you like to talk about that and your experience with Bella Andre, Barbara Freedy, you know, at London Book Fair, and what you did before and what we are going to do in the future?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about free. How much time do we have left? Because I could talk about there's so many wrong things said about free books. It drives me crazy. It says it devalues literature. What devalues literature is for it not to go read. Time is, books don't cost as much as the time we invest in them. When you think about it, you buy even if it's a 10-pound paperback, how many hours are you going to spend reading that book? That time is much more costly than the price of the book. As writers, convincing someone to give up, you know, handing them a thick book and saying, read this, you can go around this conference paying people $20 to read your book. They won't take it. You know, if they were honest about reading it, they'll say, no, you keep your 20 pounds. I'd rather not have all those hours taken away from me. Those hours are so dear that we can't buy them from people, much less ask them to pay us for them. Think about that. Take that home with you tonight and let that sink in, that when they read the first sentence of your book or the blurb or see the cover, they've got to say, okay, I'm going to devote 5 minutes to investigating this product. I'm going to read the first paragraph. If you're going to say, no, I'm going to save my good stuff for page 80, no one wants to get to page 80 for the good stuff. Let's cut that out. They want that first paragraph to hook them, because now there's just so much we can do with our time, and we have to combat that. And so giving away a book is basically saying, like, here, I'm trusting you with my art, enjoy it. And if you enjoy it, you supported me by finishing it, by giving me your hours. And you're going to read more. You might read more of my stuff. You might pass that book on to a friend. You might tell someone else about it, which gets me a sale. How many of you are writing right now? How many of you are writers and you got a book finished? Okay, put your hands down. How many of you would love to hand Diego your book and have him read it, and you're not going to ask for money. You're just going to give it to him, and you love for Diego to read it and finish it. He works for Kobo. If any of you didn't put your hand up again, you're crazy. I would pay Diego £10 to read any of my books that he hasn't read. There's probably a lot of them he hasn't read. And we have to have that attitude going in. I mean, I think there's more danger in websites that are paying, like streaming websites. I think there's danger in programs like Oyster or Scribd, which make you feel like you had a transaction with the author and you've paid them, and you got to read their book. Meanwhile, the author might get pennies. There's no incentive for the reader to feel like they owe you something, like a recommendation or a review, or to pass it on to a friend. The transaction's complete. I pay my monthly fee to Oyster, or I'm a subscribed member to Scribd, and so we're even. I don't think you're even. I would much rather free than pennies, and then them not feel like, because with a free book, it's like, oh, I got a free read, and that was awesome. I got to tell someone else. My neighbor, I gave him a copy of my book, and then when he finished it, he gave it to a friend, and he bragged about that later. He came to me and was like, I loved your book. I gave it to a friend to read. There's no part, and we do this all the time, right, as readers, and there's no part of us that thinks that we're stealing a book or we're stealing money from the publisher or the author. We think we're doing you a favor. We're promoting your book. So how is that free book any different than this free book? It's not. It's getting a reader. And for those of you who have published and you're watching your sales not go anywhere, or watching your downloads not go anywhere, you know it's so difficult to get people to invest their time.
Not only getting a reader, but getting a fan that can turn into potential super fan, so somebody willing to advocate
Absolutely.
you and your works and generate the word of mouth, which is by far the most powerful, I think.
There's nothing like it. If you could give me, I want to use numbers that make sense for starting off. You could give me $20,000, or you could give me 100 readers who will tell everyone they know about my book and read anything that I write in the future. So 20,000 versus 100 readers. I'm taking those 100 readers every single time. And this is as someone who was broke, living in a 750 square foot house. I can't do that in meters in my head, but it's tiny. This area is much bigger than the house that I lived in while I was a writer, and working a day job in a bookstore. $20,000 is nothing to me. Give me those 100 readers. Now, when you have free books, you might have 40,000 downloads in order to get 100 dedicated readers. Most people just download free stuff. I'm tempted to go scan my computer, my phone, and get all of these because these are my friends, and I would love to have their books for free on my thing. When will I get around to reading them? I don't know. So you're not really losing a sale with every one of those downloads. Don't ever do that math. Instead, think about the chance of getting those really avid fans, the ones that make your career.